Hello, welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Aleks, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin. Today, we're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything. What I decided to do was go through some of the questions that I have gotten on my various social media channels over the last week or so and give a deeper response on a couple of things. And at least one of them is not actually a question, but it's a comment, and I want to make sure I set the record straight. So stay tuned for that. As always, before I go any further, I want to mention that if you have not already, you should get my 9-minute kettlebell bodyweight challenge. No matter what your goals are, this is going to help you to achieve them a bit more easily. Most likely, it is a combination, or I should say a compilation rather, of some of the finest gait pattern strength movements that you can get. And, you know, the gait pattern is arguably the most fundamental movement that humans can do. And the stronger it is, the easier it is to apply that strength to pretty much anything else, whether it's lower body strength, upper body strength, whatever it may be. And of course, as the name implies, it only takes 9 minutes. And a lot of people have told me that it's actually helped make their regular training quite a bit stronger, which of course makes sense because this has a very nice carryover into your squats, your deadlifts, swings, military press, push-ups, pull-ups, everything like that. So go to 9minutechallenge.com. Get your own free copy, and then, of course, drop me a line and let me know how you like it. All right, now, without further ado, I want to go through some of the questions that I have gotten recently and give a little bit more detail on them. So this one comes from an Instagram post that I did on the utility of the kettlebell high pull. And Rom says, I was wondering, I'm a big kettlebell and bodyweight fan, more that than any other type of training, because it's the most fun, the cool exercises like the swing, the clean, Turkish get-ups. But in terms of bulletproofing the body, are they less effective? Thanks for the content and help. All right, well, first and foremost, you have to keep in mind, I like to use the term bulletproofing all the time, but it's kind of a nebulous term. You know, it's a slang term for essentially getting more resilient. And it's not really like a scientific term. The other thing to keep in mind is that, what does it mean to be bulletproof or resilient? And there's a lot that goes into it. And the thing you have to keep in mind is that your body is made to do a great many movements. And I would say that in particular, if you are more limited in terms of what kind of physical activity that you do, so maybe it's primarily strength training and conditioning and that sort of a thing, I think most people, most of the time, need to be focused primarily on striking a proper balance in their body, as opposed to really trying to seek the highest of heights in any particular movement. So I'll give you an example. A lot of people want to military press very heavy, and kudos to them. It's a lot of fun. So they primarily do kettlebell military press for their upper body strength training. For a while, that's not going to cause you any problems, particularly if you're new to kettlebell training and you're relatively injury-free. It's not going to be an issue. The problem becomes when we start to specialize in things. Specialization in any activity is something that you'll have to do for certain sports. I mean, really every sport, to be very honest with you, because you're not going to get to a high level of competition unless you are specializing. So it's a must for that. But if you're not competing, you're not getting paid, for your physical performance, it doesn't make any sense to specialize. So this is one of the problems that I think that a lot of people have when they take on kettlebell training, is because even when they find good reputable sources of information, they are encouraged to, for instance, only do certain exercises and ignore other things. So like only do the kettlebell military press. These other kettlebell pressing exercises you really don't need to do. They're vain, whatever. I really don't buy into that for a number of reasons. One of them being that the body is meant to do a lot of things. So it makes sense to narrow your choices down under many circumstances, like you have a limited amount of time to train, a limited amount of energy, you're brand new. I mean, for things like this, you don't necessarily need a whole lot of variety, but over time, it only makes sense to practice other movements that are, perhaps within the same spectrum of movement. So we'll use the military press again. Incline press is another very good movement to train, and you can train it with kettlebells, especially if you train at home. It's not that challenging. You just kind of prop your back up against the couch or something like that, and you can kind of press at a different angle. Likewise, floor press, bridge floor press. There are plenty of great calisthenics movements for pressing. Push-ups come to mind as one of them. And then, of course, the same thing can be said about really any other type of movement. that approach to training is going to make you much more quote unquote bulletproof than just about anything else. And this would work with dumbbells. I don't think it would work as well with barbells, frankly, because barbells are a little bit more fickle in terms of the expectations that are foisted upon you if you're going to be lifting barbells. It's just they're a lot less forgiving to the body than kettlebells and dumbbells are, and calisthenics as well. But that would be the right approach to bulletproofing. I would also say from experience, for instance, what most people need is more training of what's called the posterior chain, or the muscles that you don't see when you're looking in a mirror. So, things like on the back of your body, like your back muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, calves, things like that. All these things are going to keep you bulletproof. So a nice balanced approach to your training. You're not obsessing over just 2 to 3 movements alone. You're doing a reasonable amount of variety in the movements that you select. And, you're not afraid to move on to other exercises as time goes on. So that's what I would say. I don't think that they're not good for bulletproofing. I think actually for most people, kettlebells are going to be a better selection. Kettlebells and calisthenics and then natural human movement are going to be the ideal selections for bulletproofing. Whereas, and again, dumbbells can be a very good tool as well. There are other things like sandbag training, odd object training that I think are good. Barbell training, like I said, I'm a fan. I think it's a lot of fun to do. Not necessarily going to be for everybody, however. So what it really comes down to with becoming bulletproof, again, in a very generic use of the term, is going to be striking the right balance in your training. Balance meaning, you're not doing the same thing the same way over and over and over again until the point where you're building up overuse injuries and things like that. And the kettlebell is an excellent tool for it. So it's kind of a long answer to a short question, but there you have it. There you be. All right, the next one is something that I want to clear up because this is something that I got on a rather popular Instagram post of mine. It was showing you the proper way to do a kettlebell hinge specifically for the swing. And one thing that a lot of people do is they have too much bend in the knees, or they're trying to stay too upright, so it becomes a little bit squatty. And for the record, there are a variety of swings that you can do, and there are squattier variations of swings that are perfectly good to do, but you have to do them on purpose. It can't be, because you simply cannot control the movement. That's not the kind of variety that we want. And so it showed in one panel, a less correct version of the swing, and in the other panel, a very good version of the swing. Well, one gal came in and she said, no, the second image is not correct either. He's supposed to be looking at 30 degrees, parentheses, the ground, when he bends his hips, so his neck is in the same line as his spine. Both images are wrong. When she says he, she's referring to me. I think she didn't realize that was me in the photo. This is a real navel-gazing argument that went on maybe 10 or so years ago in the kettlebell world, which was, do you extend your neck, meaning look up when you're doing kettlebell ballistic exercises, or do you keep your neck neutral, or what they would say a packed neck? So you would, do kind of a double chin, and you would avoid any sort of extension of the neck. Now, the one benefit I would say of keeping a more neutral neck is that it can be a little bit easier for some people if you have neck issues to be able to do swings and stuff like that without any issues. But generally speaking, like even with very average neck mobility, there should be no problem with looking up. Now, I want to make it clear too, when I say looking up, I'm not talking about looking up at the ceiling. I'm just saying looking in front of you. Jeff Newport, who's a retired master SFG, has a great cue, which would be look at the horizon, meaning kind of like what I always tell people is the meeting space between the wall and the floor is a good place to look at when you're training. So, and you want to keep your eyes there the whole time. So your eyes are not shifting up, down, whatever. Generally speaking, that's going to necessitate a little bit of neck extension, meaning just looking up. But that is going to help improve your body's extension response. And, the kettlebell swing is an exercise in extension, like your hips have to extend. You've got a lot of your muscles in your back are going to have to stay at alert to help you to extend better, because if they are flexed, it's just taking away your ability to powerfully extend at the hips and do so explosively as well. So a lot of times what ends up happening is that people who do that kind of swing with their neck packed, they have a much less powerful looking swing. versus people who do it with their eyes looking forward. Generally, you can see that they're able to generate more power. And I'm not saying that keeping the packed neck is wrong or bad or evil or anything like that. You can do it like that if you want. But one of the issues that people run into, and this is what I told her in the comments, was that for a lot of trainees, they have a very difficult time maintaining proper spinal alignment when they're trying to quote unquote keep their neck neutral, because what they're doing is they're looking down, and that's going to end up activating this sort of flexion response, which is your body's going to want to kind of curl forward. So it just sort of defeats the purpose of the movement. And moreover, a lot of times people will call it hyperextension of the neck. What that means is you're extending more than you should. Nobody that I have ever met is arguing for hyperextension of the neck when you swing. What they're suggesting is you keep your head up. Okay. Again, if you have neck problems where that's not feasible, it's not the end of the world to keep your neck a little bit more neutral, but it's in no way wrong to keep your head up. Look at any Olympic lifter. Okay. They're not looking down at the floor. Very few power lifters look down at the floor, as far as I know, look down at the floor when they're doing their lifting. Some of them may start like that, but for example, with the deadlift, but as far as I know, and I'll admit, I'm not an expert on powerlifting, but as far as I know, a good many of them who do that start by looking down at the floor. As soon as they start to get to the difficult point in the lift, they start looking up, and sometimes really, really far up, like up to the ceiling, right? Same thing goes with the squat. That's just the way it is. Head position does matter. Most of us who are listening to this are not powerlifting, not interested in powerlifting. So don't take this as a dig at anybody who does happen to do it like that. But for recreational lifting, it doesn't make sense to say that it's better to look down at the floor when you swing. For most people, that's not going to be the right thing to do. For some people, they can do it just fine, and power to them. That's what they want to do. As a side note, I asked her to explain a little bit more why she thought it was wrong, and I never got a response. Like, do you think it's less effective? Do you think it's dangerous? I never heard anything back. So I want to set the record straight with that. You can do it either way you want, but the way that I always teach it is a little bit of neck extension at the bottom. Just you're looking where you're going. It's not that complicated. All right. Next, I had a video on shoulder external rotation, which is a favorite movement of mine for really helping to, here's the word again, bulletproof the shoulders. We get a lot of internal rotation when we military press, when we do push-ups, pull-ups. Most upper body strength exercises that we love require a good deal of internal rotation of the shoulders at some point. And very little external rotation gets trained on average. So I'm a big fan of doing that as some supplementary work. So somebody asked, how many sets and reps should one do of shoulder external rotations? Generally speaking, I'm a fan of moderate to high reps for these, and low weight too. I mean, Christopher Summer, who is a very well-known gymnastics strength expert, has pointed out that just like with anything else, you can work up to going quite heavy with shoulder external rotation work. And that may be true for people who are more interested in really, really high level strength work, body weight, kettlebell, whatever it may be. Most people are going to get all they need out of somewhat lightweight and moderate to high reps. So for example, I have a 10-pound dumbbell at home, and usually in the evening, I'll do one set of 10 reps with 4 different external rotation exercises. Now, you don't have to do it like that. You can do just one of them. Generally speaking, the one that I like is where, if you're not watching this on YouTube, this is not going to be a big help, but you've got your arm resting at about a 90-degree angle on one of your knees. Could be on a bench, couch, whatever it may be, but your elbow is about in line with your shoulder or slightly beneath it. And then you just move back. So it's kind of like you're making that goal sign. You see like referees do in soccer. And you do that, keep a nice big chest, and you're golden. You could easily do, let's say 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps. It's a good classic rep scheme. 1 to 2 sets of maybe 20 reps, going very light. All those things work. So that's what I would recommend. I wouldn't say to do low rep, heavy weight. It's just really not, unless you're going to do it with 2 hands. Like there is a variation called the Cuban rotation, which would be done with a barbell. And for that, because it's a little bit heavier, you can do fewer reps, but generally speaking, moderate to higher reps are what you're going to want to do. And this is a good rule in general when we're talking about smaller muscle groups. If you want to get them stronger or get some sort of a growth response out of them, get them bigger, they're going to respond to more volume on average. Whereas I think this is not 100% the case, but larger muscles, a lot of times you just don't need as much volume in order to get them bigger and stronger. May still help, but you're more likely to get a good response with lower volume if the muscles are larger than if they are smaller. And when it comes to the muscles around the shoulders, higher reps and moderate reps just seem to work very well. All right, and then the final question we've got here is the bridge floor press. So this was on an Instagram post that I did. And a gentleman asks, he says, Aleks, I'm able to press more in the military press than with the bridge floor press. What's wrong with me? Perfectly valid question, because one of the things that's great about the bridge floor press is that it allows you to use your heavier kettlebells and really kind of start getting your body used to lifting heavier weight, albeit not at exactly the same angle, anything close really to what you would be doing for an overhead press. So I told him it's really more than likely just a technique issue. It's hard to know for sure without actually looking at something like that. But generally speaking, if you're in a more advantageous position to lift heavy and, pressing something in a horizontal pressing pattern, like what you would do for a bench press or a floor press, you can handle a lot more weight in that position than you can the standing military press. So if you're having an issue there, almost 100% certain that it's a technique issue. This is maybe a less likely thing, but I've also had times, for instance, when I had a shoulder issue and I could press at a lot of angles, but I could not press at a horizontal angle for whatever reason. And it wasn't until I got my shoulder issues fixed up, which was just by doing some shoulder isolation work through lateral raises, like lifting dumbbells out to the side, or rear laterals, as they're called, I think, or reverse dumbbell flies, actually, which can be done with any number of implements. Kettlebells, not so much, but you could do it with like a small weight plate or ankle weights or that sort of thing. When I fixed that, I was able to do it. He didn't mention this, so I'm just going to say this probably not his issue, probably a technique related issue. But that has been my experience, is that it's either bad technique or maybe your shoulder is telling you that you need to take a little bit better care of it. So this concludes this Hebrew Hammer podcast. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please feel free to like and share it. And as always, have fun and happy training.